One more look at your traffic conditions out there this morning. Highway 1 at North Grampian Hills Road. Also, I-20 westbound just after Monticello Road. A report of an accident there. And still kind of working on getting things cleaned up downtown Columbia, Sumter Street at Wheat Street. Sunny and breezy, 67 today. We're looking for about 69 tomorrow under sunny skies, low to mid, or then we hit about 71 by Sunday. So really a good weekend of weather on the way. Great forecast for tailgating tomorrow and also for winning a football game. I'm just going to put it out there. But right now we're sitting at a chilly 48 on 107.5 The Game.
Nine o'clock on your football Friday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltry along with you here on The Game. Just a little over 24-ish hours away. I guess like 30-ish hours. I'm doing quick math in my head. That's very dangerous, Jack. Away from South Carolina, Missouri, kicking things off tomorrow afternoon, about 4:15 out at Williams-Brice Stadium, where we feel pretty good about this one, I would say. We're going to get into why we maybe shouldn't here in a couple of minutes, but man, the vibes this week, Jack, have just been really positive. Plenty to get into over the course of the next hour, diving into that matchup tomorrow with South Carolina and Missouri. But it is 9 a.m. That means have to kick things off with our 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Time to get hyped.
Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm.
Sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803-ALL-9s. I imagine we're going to be hearing this plenty tomorrow, hopefully after a lot of touchdowns for South Carolina in this game against Missouri. It's not really a night game. It's a half-night game, like with the way that the time changes now, because it starts getting dark at like 5:30. So by the time you come out after halftime, it'll be fully engulfed in darkness, and you'll get the light show and all that kind of stuff. So a half-night game still should be a good atmosphere. Is this a rivalry game? Like, just off the top of your head, do you consider this a rivalry game? Okay. There is the Mayor's Cup. Yeah. I Yeah, and of course, these two teams have played every single year since 2012 because that's when Missouri joined the SEC, and being in the East, they had to play each other every single year as divisional opponents. And I would say for the first handful of years, this game was just another game on the schedule. At least that's the sentiment I got from a lot of South Carolina fans. Eli Drinkwitz has taken this to another level, though, which is why I feel like, and probably from the Missouri side of things, this probably doesn't feel like a rivalry because at some point in a rivalry, you got to go back and forth. And since Drinkwitz has been there, Carolina's not been able to get the better of them. We ran a poll on our Twitter page. It started yesterday, and we asked the question of who is the biggest villain, who's the biggest Gamecock football villain right now. Your options were Eli Drinkwitz, Dabo Swinney, Mark Stoops, and other. Eli Drinkwitz beat out Dabo Swinney 45% to 40%. There is enough people, and this, how many votes we tally? Over 4,000 votes. So nearly 2,000 people that voted on that viewed Eli Drinkwitz as a bigger villain to South Carolina football than Dabo Swinney is. That tells you how personal this has gotten. Well, I think Drinkwitz has what many people deem to be a unearned arrogance about him. Go back to a couple years ago, and he did the thing with Darth Vader after that he beat in Florida, and that was kind of one of those, oh, hey, look, he's taking a dig at Florida, no big deal. And that was back when they were going 6-6 and 6-7, where you weren't really paying a lot of attention to them. But last year, when they had, and credit to them, a great season that culminated with the Cotton Bowl victory, you heard a lot more from Eli Drinkwitz because they were winning so much. And this year, in the games they've won, you've heard a lot from him in quips and things like that. He's just annoying, right? And when you have this game that, like you said, from his perspective, he's never lost to South Carolina, going all the way back to his days at App State. You just look at him and you're like, there's no reason we should be losing this guy. This dweeb-looking coach that, is the guy that reminds a teacher that there's homework 30 seconds before class ends or something along those lines. You shouldn't be losing to that guy. And you hate him having the upper hand on you, which is why, and again, I don't think Missouri views this as a rivalry because, again, they've just been winning this game pretty handily at times these past handful of years. But for Carolina fans, they're just frothing at the mouth to finally just punch this guy in the face and get one over on him.
Like, it's been a while since you could say South Carolina has been able to punch Mizzou in the mouth. And it goes back before Drinkwitz was there. It goes back before Beamer was there. So it's been a while. Missouri's always played tough on South Carolina. But like I said before at the beginning of the show, I feel like they finally have the pieces that they've been missing, like a run game. The defense is fantastic. And I feel like you've been able to be more physical than teams this year. So put all those things together, include into what you already have, and I think you can really go out here and win this game. But with Eli Drinkwitz and what this Mizzou team can do, there is a reason why they've only lost 2 games. They sneak out of games with wins somehow. So that is something you could potentially see tomorrow if the opportunity presents itself.
And we have to also understand the stakes of this game. And I've said this plenty of times. I personally don't think Carolina has a pathway to the playoff outside of a bunch of chaos happening. But if they had a convincing win over Missouri tomorrow, that would probably at least bump them up into the top 20, and then we'll see what happens from there. But again, I'm not counting my eggs before they hatch here. But from Missouri's side of things, they only have 2 losses this year. 2 bad losses to Texas A&M and Alabama, where they got run over by a combined score of 75 to 10. But regardless, it's only 2 losses. And as we've said a lot, throughout the season, we feel like a 10-2 SEC team should have a really good shot at making the playoff. Missouri might be the exception there, but let's just say they did pick up a victory over a South Carolina team that's ranked 3 spots ahead of them at 21st. That would be a feather to put in their cap on their resume on what has been an otherwise underwhelming series of victories so far this year. And again, I still think they're a long shot for the playoffs regardless of what happens this weekend, but that does help their case out a lot if they win this game.
I just wonder, like, where would they? I mean, they're at what, 23 right now?
Was it
They would
20,
they would.
23 or 24?
It's weird because they do have 2 losses,
No,
but
they're 23. 23.
Yeah, they're kind of in the same boat as South Carolina, to where I think their playoff odds are not great, and they need a lot of help around them and need a lot of teams to lose. So yeah, I'm kind of with you in the same accord that I don't think Missouri is a playoff team. Like, yeah, they have 2 losses. Yeah, they could potentially be 10-2 by the end of the season, but like, they're probably not going to be in the SEC title game, and I think they're just going to be too far back, even with a win over South Carolina. I mean, they also get to play Arkansas at the end of the year. So I just feel like there's not enough. I mean, you look at the losses they've had, they've been blown out in these games. I just think that really is going to put a damper on any chance they've had. It's one thing if they lose those games close, like South Carolina did, but you got blown out in both games, and that's the issue.
I've been trying to think about what team this Missouri team reminds me of from what South Carolina's seen so far this year. And I don't necessarily think there's a direct comparison, but I think the closest thing to me is Oklahoma. However, they're better on offense than Oklahoma is, but not quite as dominant on defense as Oklahoma is, if that makes sense. So, like, I think they're kind of in between in both those categories, but regardless, their offense is not all that great, especially with Brady Cook out and Drew Pine expected to start coming up tomorrow. And they are kind of, relying on their defense to help them out in a lot of these games, though I don't think their defense overall is as good as what Oklahoma has.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just, I don't know what to expect from this Missouri team. Like, we know one thing for sure. Whoever's at quarterback, it's probably going to be Drew Pine, but they're going to get the ball out in space to their playmakers. Luther Burden and Theo Weiss are what makes this offense tick. And if you stop them, if you find a way to keep them, let's say under like 50 yards apiece and like a touchdown maybe at most, I think you're feeling really good about what this defense is going to be able to do. And again, it's more so about what South Carolina is going to do in this game. I think if South Carolina loses this game, I feel like it's because it would beat itself. Like, I think that's kind of the moral of the story this year with South Carolina is anytime it's lost games, like Alabama, turnovers cost them, missing a field goal cost them. LSU, you want to talk about penalties, they had a 17-0 lead in that game and didn't do anything with it. And then the Ole Miss game, you shot yourself right in the foot out of the gate with going for it on a fake punt that kind of swung the momentum very early in the game. So if South Carolina loses tomorrow, maybe Missouri just plays a good game. Maybe I'm wrong. But I just have that feeling like if South Carolina's going to lose this game, it's going to be at its own hand. Not so much, Missouri's just the better team, they beat you.
And obviously teams change over the course of the season. And if you were to take the South Carolina team that we had back in September where the defense was obviously strong as it's been all season, but the offense was just very clunky and not fluid whatsoever, I'd have a lot of concerns about this. But the offense that we've seen out of South Carolina these past 2 weeks, in addition to the defense continuing to be dominant, gives me a lot of hope and optimism that they're going to be able to go out there and take care of business. And I won't spoil my final score just yet. I'll get to it a little bit later. But I have Carolina winning this game actually pretty handily tomorrow because I certainly believe they can do that. But us talking about this game like this all week long has aggravated so many people that listen because they don't want to hear this because they're afraid Carolina is going to end up blowing it and tripping over their own 2 feet. I want to play into that a little bit coming up next because I can understand where people are coming from and I get why they are frustrated with us talking about it this way. So we'll lean into the negative side of this going into tomorrow's game between South Carolina and Missouri. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Football Friday here on The Game. Tyler Head here for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. In case you haven't noticed, it's rained quite a bit over the past couple of days. I know we went like an entire month without any rain, but we've certainly got plenty of it here this week. That's for sure in the Midlands area. And if you have an open crawl space under your home, you may have standing water under there. High humidity and condensation in your crawl space can create an environment for mold, mildew, and pests, including things like termites. The moisture can also lead to things like wood rot and floor joist problems as well. And those musty smells are awful odors that come from the mold and mildew in your crawl space can cause health issues like runny nose, itchy eyes, and coughs, because about half the air that you breathe in your home comes from that crawl space. That's where our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists come in. You can go online and schedule an appointment today at cantycanfix.com. They'll come out and assess what's going on with your crawl space and get it fixed right so you and your family can live comfortably with no worries going forward. Again, get your crawl space checked out with our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfixit.com. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. It's our Ed and Jack Veltri along with you on your Football Friday here on the game. It is a busy Football Friday as always. Jay and Elijah are going to be out at Columbia Craft on Green Street down in the Vista for their tailgate show from 3 until 6 p.m. Come by and see them. And then the Love Chevrolet High School Football Scoreboard Show with Justin Hall and Elijah Campbell at 7 p.m. tonight as the playoffs get rolling with high school football here in the Midlands. Certainly looking forward to that. Jack, I will inform you that Terry is producing for us for the rest of the hour, so hopefully nothing catches on fire. We'll see, but we'll try and navigate this one as lightly as we can. I want to dive into what I mentioned right before the break there, where all week long, we've had such a high level of confidence in this game on what we've seen out of South Carolina these past couple weeks. The November Beamer era strikes again, and Carolina's playing its best football the entire year as of right now, compared to a team like Missouri, who, if we watched what happened last week against Oklahoma, took 3 miracles essentially to beat a very bad Oklahoma team that South Carolina bludgeoned only a couple weeks ago. Everything going into this game tells me that South Carolina should not have a problem. But, and I understand where they're coming from, a lot of our listeners are saying, you can't say that. That means they're going to go out there and blow it tomorrow.
You know what? I don't understand it because, here we are a few weeks ago after the A&M game. People were telling us we're too negative. But now that we're being positive, it's a problem. Like what? Like, come on. Like, how can you not be positive about this team with the way they've been playing? Like, they've been playing like an elite level football team. But I also understand the sentiment that a lot of people are worried that, South Carolina hasn't beaten Missouri since 2018. So many things have gone wrong in this game in the past. Like, I understand that, but these are different times. And again, if South Carolina didn't have X, Y, and Z things corrected going into this matchup, if they didn't have a competent offense, if they didn't have the defense playing at the rate they have been, if they weren't playing like this, then I would totally be with you. Like, oh yeah, like South Carolina, I'd be a lot more worried. But truthfully, man, like, I'm not. And it's not because like Missouri's not good. I think they're a good football team. I just think South Carolina is playing with its hair on fire right now, and they haven't given me much reason to believe that there are signs of regression coming. You know what I mean? So
here are some things that can go wrong tomorrow. Again, just kind of playing devil's advocate, how could South Carolina lose this game? Because I think if South Carolina plays its best brand of football like we've seen these past couple of weeks, they shouldn't have any issues. But something that has been a concern for a lot of this season has been turnovers for Carolina. They had a turnover in every single game all the way through the Alabama game, going back to right at a month ago now. No turnovers against Oklahoma, and then only 1 turnover against A&M and Vanderbilt. So in the past 3 games, the 3-game winning streak Carolina's been on, they've had a total of 2 turnovers lost in those games. They have put the ball on the ground a couple different times, but were able to retain some of those. So only 3 turnovers in the past 3 weeks compared to 11 turnovers in the first 6 games of the season. So if Carolina goes out there and Lenore Sailor's putting the ball on the ground, he's putting the ball in harm's way. If Rocket Sanders getting the ball punched out like he did against A&M a couple weeks ago, and this is compiling, then there's a serious chance South Carolina could be in trouble. They are giving Missouri short fields to work with. Again, Drew Pine is not going to be the guy that's going to go out there and manufacture 4 80-yard drives for touchdowns. But you give him a short field of 30 and 40 yards, he absolutely can take this team down there and score.
Most definitely. Like, you do not want to put the ball in harm's way. And that would be something that actually is concerning. But I think they've done a much better job lately of limiting those mistakes. Like, coming out of the bye week, they've been much better about it. And it's happened, twice you said. So I think for South Carolina, like, you don't want to, like, let old habits die. You do not want to return to what you were doing wrong, like, a few months ago. But now it's like you're playing good football. You're doing what you need to do. But I can always understand that there is that sense of, well, what if it happens? Like, because it did happen early in the season, doesn't mean it's fully gone yet. But I think in this game, you have to really make sure that you're protecting the ball, 2 hands on it if you need to, and don't put it in harm's way. Because the last thing you want is, like you said, man, just Drew Pine with a short field. I feel much better about his odds doing that rather than him, having to go down and just drive in general. So, who knows? I mean, I'm sure some heroes are going to have to step up for Missouri in this game to win. And the last thing you want to do if you're South Carolina is give Missouri an inch, because they could potentially take it a mile.
Another thing that South Carolina struggled with a lot early on in the season was penalties, of course. These past couple of games, they've still committed a decent amount. 6 against Oklahoma, 3 against Vanderbilt, and then 3 against A&M, and then 6 against Vanderbilt this past weekend. But the total yardage of penalties they've had the past 3 weeks has paled in comparison to some of the stuff they were doing earlier on in the season. And I've noticed here lately, and there were a couple of holding calls and false starts and things like that. But for the most part, they've cleaned up the pre-snap stuff, the offsides, the false starts, those kind of things that seem to have plagued them so much in those big games earlier on in the season. If they get back into those old ways, much like the turnovers tomorrow, that could be a big factor as well.
That's the thing. Like, it's all the things that they were doing wrong at the beginning of the year that we're talking about that they fixed, but it's like it could potentially come back. Like that, there's nothing stopping the penalties and the turnovers from coming back, but they've been so good about limiting them. If this were a 1-game sample size of them limiting these things like they did in the Oklahoma game, then I'd be like, okay, yeah, like South Carolina, they could potentially return to it. But the fact they've been able to do this now for 3 games, and the other thing we also have to talk about here, I'm sure you're going to bring it up, is the sacks. Like, how impactful could sacks be in this game? Like, let's say Missouri's able to get to the quarterback and able to create pressure. That in itself could force turnovers and other mistakes and penalties. So the sacks, I feel like, are probably the biggest thing in this game, to where if there's 5 sacks allowed, you're probably getting called for some holding. You're probably potentially allowing the opportunity for the ball to be turned over. So I think if you're South Carolina, you got to make sure the protection's good up front, because that's one of the keys, man, where they've lost these games, is that they have lost the battle at the line of scrimmage. And
that sack thing is important. That also goes back to Lenore Sellers continuing to use that athleticism on full display like we had the past couple weeks. Again, through the first, half of the season, we saw moments where he could escape pressure and moments where he could escape what looked to be sure sacks and make things happen. But he's done it consistently these past 2 weeks, where it's like he's been covered in butter. Nobody's been able to get to him behind the line of scrimmage. And you have a decent pass rush with Missouri, with Johnny Walker and Zion Young and guys like that are going to have the ability to put pressure on the North Sellers. Can he continue to use that athleticism and put it on display like a Cam Newton or a Michael Vick he has these past couple weeks to get out of trouble when it does present itself?
Yeah, that's the thing, man. He has been playing so good lately, and Sellers is making all these crazy plays, and he's got the 51-yard bomb. He's running for his life and making big plays when he needs to. Play like that, and you could potentially get a big win tomorrow. That he just needs to play more along the lines of what he's been doing lately, and that goes for everyone else as well.
Again, I bring this segment up because we look on paper and South Carolina is the better team in so many different areas here, but there's something about a team that has luck on their side. And when you look at it at Missouri, they have won a lot of games this year that they probably didn't have any business winning, including last weekend against Oklahoma with the scoop and scores and with the fumbles and all this crazy stuff that happened, the Luth Burden catch in like double, triple coverage, whatever it was. Sometimes the ball just bounces the way for certain teams. And a big factor in this game tomorrow is putting them away. Because if you're in a 3-point game with 5 minutes to go, and I don't know what the rhyme or reason is, for some reason those kind of games have been going Missouri's way this year. To beat them, you have to look at what A&M and Alabama did to them, and they just bludgeoned them for 4 quarters. That's what Carolina's going to need to do tomorrow. Don't give them any chance for another act of God to help them out in the fourth quarter of one of these games.
South Carolina's been so much better about putting games away and like slamming the door on teams lately, where it's like they did it against Oklahoma, they did it against Texas A&M in the second half, and they certainly did it last week against Vanderbilt. That is more of what you need to see. Don't go back to this LSU, Alabama type stuff where you have the lead in the fourth quarter and then you blow it. Like don't like, that's not going to be acceptable tomorrow. You gotta jump, go right at their throats first quarter, score 14 points, whatever you gotta do. Put them in a big hole to where it's like, hey, you're not getting out of it. You're 10 feet deep, and you are not coming out alive. That is the mindset this team needs to have, and they need to slam the door in the first half to really feel like, hey, like Missouri's not coming back. That's how they need to feel.
Again, I understand why people don't like hearing us talk South Carolina up too much because they're afraid that that's going to cause the and I'm a superstitious person myself. I get it. It's going to cause the inverse thing to happen where Missouri comes in here and wins the game. But again, if South Carolina doesn't beat themselves, I think they should be fine tomorrow. Have more thoughts on this. I'll also get to some of your thoughts on Love Chevrolet phone lines, 803-404-6100. Coming up next is the Football Friday. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry here in the Extra Point on the Game.
Hey, want to tell you about our show sponsor, PL Wine Pool and Spa. They're an award-winning swimming pool builder that's been in the business for 25 years with more than 40 years of pool construction experience. They service the entire Midlands area, whether you're looking for weekly cleaning maintenance or a chlorine to salt conversion with services like safety cover installs and even safety fence installs. You can check out all their offerings at the showroom in Lexington, South Carolina, and you can also talk to their experts about any and everything you might need. Their retail store is located at 5541 Sunset Boulevard in Lexington. Again, that is 5541 Sunset Boulevard. And you can also check them out online at plwinepools.com. Again, that's plwinepools.com. We want to thank PL Wine Pool and Spa for being a wonderful sponsor of 107.5 The Game.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Football Friday here on the game. Time for our Lay in the Woods segment brought to you by our friends over at Georgia Pacific. And Jack, we certainly hope to see the South Carolina defense lay the wood as it's been doing all season, especially when it comes to getting after the quarterback. But a stat that I brought up a couple times this week, and I'll reiterate once again, Missouri's offense in the Beamer era, taking on South Carolina, has allowed less than 1 sack per game. I have a pretty good feeling that Kennard, Stewart, Demetrius Knight, Tonka, Boogie, whoever, I think they're going to be able to get over this mark tomorrow. What do you say?
I say yes, because look, Missouri's offensive line, they've given up some sacks against good defenses like A&M and Oklahoma. So I have no reason to believe why South Carolina can't be the next team to have a few sacks. I'm not saying they need like 5 sacks or anything, but you put pressure on the quarterback, put pressure on Brady Cook, Drew Pine, whoever it is, and make life difficult on them. You continue to get into the backfield with quarterback hurries and stuff, you have a really good chance at disrupting what this offense is going to potentially try to do tomorrow.
So Missouri's only allowed 20 sacks so far this season, though 19 of those 20 sacks have come in SEC play alone. So again, once they started stepping up and playing better defenses, those sack numbers started to soar quite a bit. And again, hopefully South Carolina can have a good day, much like they've had the entire season when it comes to getting to whichever quarterback plays, which we assume at this point in time is going to be Drew Pine. Let's head out to Love Chevrolet phone lines. We got Casey in, and Gilbert's been hanging on. Casey, appreciate your call as always. What's on your mind today?
Fellas, I wasn't able to give my vibe check this morning, but you make me want to give a really good one here because we're where we're supposed to be. In all truth, we're one of the top 5 best teams in the entire nation. And I expect us to handle this team like we're playing Vanderbilt again on a bad year. That's just kind of how I feel about Carolina's team. That says nothing about Mizzou. And I feel like if we handle Mizzou and we handle every game here on out, due to our strength of schedule and the way that we're playing, we should be guaranteed a spot, even if it's at the bottom in this new CF. And, fellas, I think the score is going to be somewhere in the 40s for us, and they'll be lucky to score. This is going to be a sack nation tomorrow.
Casey, are we finally going to get the donut that this defense has been talking about the entire year?
I'm not sure about the donut, but I do think this is where special teams is going to get their score.
Okay.
And,
we're finally going to be able to give away $1,000 is what you're telling me from Lori Lisa, right?
I think so. And what's crazy is I look at Mizzou, I look at Texas A&M like I guess a lot of people look at Mizzou. Texas A&M was a big hurdle that, at least from my recollection of watching us play, we had a lot of trouble beating Texas A&M. And when we did that, then when they were at the top of the SEC, the rest of the SEC is no problem to us. That was a big one for me. So beating Mizzou, I've seen that. But I ain't never seen us do what we did to Texas A&M. This is a successful season if we do that to Clemson.
Hey, man, I'm feeling it. You're confident like a lot of people in this fan base. As always, appreciate the call there, 803-404-6100. So Casey is not mad at us for being very confident this week, it seems like.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. I have some thoughts on that. Yeah, and thanks for the call. I really appreciate it, Casey. But, look, win out, make the playoff. It's not impossible. I will say that. I would give, look, I think South Carolina's got the best chance amongst 3 lost teams to get into the playoff. We just don't know how the playoff committee is really going to judge a 3-loss team when it comes to the end of the year. But to say South Carolina's, look, we talk about us being confident. 40 points on the board for South Carolina and a near donut tomorrow and a special teams touchdown. That's confidence at an all-time high right there. I like it.
He brought up some of the metrics that the committee at least tells us they deem to be important. Carolina is right now 8th in strength of schedule, which is kind of where they've been pretty consistently throughout the year. Strength of record, this has actually kind of dropped a little bit since last week. They're down to 17th in that part. But something that South Carolina's done a really good job of this season is total game control. They are 7th in that metric as well. So when you talk about those 3 important categories that do get brought up a lot when it comes to the playoff rankings, Carolina pretty high in those. And again, with the way things set up as of right now, this is the team in Missouri that the playoff committee deems to be the 23rd best team in the country out of all 134 FBS teams. And then in a couple weeks, you're going to get the opportunity to play another ranked team, the 20th best team, according to the committee in Clemson. So a potential for 2 ranked wins over the course of these next couple weeks. Again, how much does that skyrocket you? I don't know. I think from my personal standpoint, Carolina's going to need some help, like some chaos in the Big 12 or something along those lines to help boost them up a couple spots. But the fact that we're sitting here at 9 games into the season, even being able to theoretically talk about Carolina maybe having a shot at the playoff is a huge difference from where we were a year ago. That's for sure.
Dude, it's wild. Look, whatever happens the rest of the season, it's just crazy that we're talking about South Carolina having a chance. Like, that is something I never thought we'd be able to talk about this year, but they've been playing really good football. And look, if Clemson keeps winning, that might be a top 15 team. That might be a top 15 matchup that South Carolina is playing right there in a few weeks. It has the potential to be at least a top 20. So, look, you just hope the teams that you have beaten this season keep winning, and that way it looks better on your resume come season's end that, hey, we beat the ACC champ potentially. We beat the SEC champ in Texas A&M. You just hope those things kind of keep working to where you can talk about, hey, we've got some of the best wins that no one else has.
That is the interesting thing here, because outside of the game that you're going to play in a couple weeks up the road at Memorial Stadium, Carolina fans should be the biggest fans of Texas A&M as well as Clemson, because if they win out all their games, and Clemson's going to need a little bit of help to get into the ACC championship game, but should they win that and win the ACC, and should Texas A&M run the table and win the SEC, Carolina would be the only team in the country with wins over 2 Power 4 conference champions, which, again, if you're looking for a last-second push to get into the playoffs, that would certainly go a long way.
Definitely. Like, put your pride aside for a second if you're a Gamecock fan. Like, I get it. You hate Clemson. You hate every team not wearing garnet and black. But, I mean, look, you want to get into the playoffs so bad, you need things to happen. That is the reality. 3 losses is probably not going to cut it on its own. You need stuff to happen around the country. You need teams to lose. So you better be rooting for like a BYU to lose. You better be rooting for chaos in the Big 12. You also need to be rooting, unfortunately, for your other team in the state to potentially go out here and win an ACC title, though you obviously still need to beat Clemson at the end of the year.
I don't think you don't even have to phrase it as like cheering for them. Just
not cheering.
Hope they don't lose, I guess, is the better way to phrase that. Because, and by the way, Clemson got a very tough test in a Pittsburgh team that just fell out of the top 25 this past weekend on the road. They lost to Virginia last weekend, which hats off to Virginia for that win there. But that's not going to be easy by any means. And again, for the sake of Carolina's playoff chances, a 10-1 or a 9-2 Clemson team at the end of the season would be the best possible team to face. And then if they could get some help to get in the ACC championship game, that would help out the cause as well. But I think we're getting too far ahead of ourselves. I hate to go back to the coaching cliche, but we got to be 1-0 this weekend. We got to focus on the task at hand and then move on to Wofford next weekend before we can start, theorizing too much on what a playoff push would look like.
Man, I haven't had South Carolina talk like this with you or fans in such a long time. It's different to look so far ahead.
I mean, it's fun. It's fun to do, though. It's cool to be in this spot.
It's fun, but it's also scary because it's like we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. They could go out here and not play well.
Well, and that's the thing, and that's where I understand the frustration from people this week. Like, you guys are getting way too far ahead of yourselves. They're going to go out there and lay an egg on Saturday against Missouri, and if they are, we will certainly apologize. But again, I feel good about tomorrow. I can't help it.
We're gonna have pitchforks outside of the studio, man. We better be careful here.
They are going to want to run us out of town if this goes the other way. But I don't think that it will. Which, by the way, appreciate Casey and Gilbert for predicting a special teams touchdown tomorrow, because if that happens, you could win $1,000 thanks to our friends over at Lawyer Lisa with the special teams touchdown contest. Again, just go online to 1075thegame.com, register for your chance to win. Again, the pot at $1,000, and if a special team score does happen tomorrow, Bill and Preston will announce the winner live on the air come Monday morning on the early game. We'll come back, wrap up hour number 1, get Jack's final thoughts and keys to victory coming out tomorrow as South Carolina takes on Missouri. It is the Extra Point on your Football Friday here on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Towerhead and Jack Feltree along with you on your Football Friday here on the game. Again, a little over 30-ish hours away from Carolina and Missouri squaring off tomorrow. Two ranked teams, only two ranked versus ranked matchups in all of college football this weekend. This game and then Tennessee and Georgia playing in Athens tomorrow night. That's where game day is going to be at tomorrow, which, by the way, shout out to our guy, Cody Rhodes, the American Nightmare, going to be the guest picker coming up tomorrow on game day. So very cool there, and should be a fun atmosphere as they're set up for that game coming up tomorrow night. Jack, but before we let you get out of here, on Reaction Monday, where we'll actually be out at Firehouse Subs in Newberry reacting to what we saw against Missouri. Our biggest headline is going to be what?
Biggest headline of the game tomorrow. Just how does South Carolina stop this streak, right? I think it's the elephant in the room that I know South Carolina fans don't like to talk about, but it's been since 2018, man. Like, where were you in 2018? What were you doing in the year of our Lord?
Gosh, I was still in college at that point in time. I'd been working in radio professionally, at least for because what was that, October of 2018 when that game happened? I was like 4 months into my professional radio career at that point in time. So it's been a while. I just met my now wife only a few months before that. So a lot's changed between now and 2018, as I imagine it has for all of us.
Dude, it's been such a long time, and it's like at some point all streaks have to end. Like, all right, Vanderbilt, I mean, that's a whole different discussion, not being South Carolina since 2008. But the point is, like, it's been a while, and I think that is the storyline. Can Shane Beamer finally get over that hump and beat Missouri, because he's yet to do so in his career at South Carolina?
If Brady Cook ends up playing tomorrow, does that change your opinion of Missouri's ability to be in this game?
No, because he's not 100%. Look, Brady Cook's a much better quarterback than Drew Pine, in my opinion. He's obviously beaten South Carolina twice before. But at the same time, I just don't know if, like, all right, if Brady's maybe like 75, 80%, you might get some good from him. But I think if South Carolina is going to lose this game, they're going to get beat by the others in that offense, the Burdens, the Weises of the world. Keep in mind, Mookie Cooper is, I believe, now out or doubtful for this game tomorrow.
He was listed as out, so he will not be available. Also down their starting center.
Exactly. So they're missing some pieces. I don't know if one guy can save this offense. Look, it took kind of a last-ditch effort against Oklahoma to win that game, and I know Cook wasn't playing in that game. But I just think this year's different. I just think South Carolina's got the pieces that they need in place to go out here and put together a winning formula to win this game tomorrow. But it does help Missouri if you have a Brady Cook out there, though I do think Drew Pine's going to be playing.
If South Carolina wins this game tomorrow, does Beamer take any kind of subtle shot, whether it be on like the on-field interview after the game or like in his presser at Eli Drinkwitz or when they're shaking hands or something like that?
Maybe he'll bring like a robot dog onto the field or something. That'd be pretty funny. Hopefully South Carolina fans don't storm the field.
No. Hey, PSA, don't storm the field against Missouri. You're beating a top 10 A&M team, fine. Okay, I get that. Missouri is not warranted. Here's the thing, because if you do that, Eli Drinkwitz is going to be able to say, they deemed us field storming worthy. That's how good of a program we are. Don't give him any ammunition to come back at you if you win this game. Don't storm the field, please.
And you're also putting $500K in his pocket. But
that is also true.
To answer the question, God, it wouldn't shock me if he did take some sort of shot at him. But I think Beamer's kind of, I don't know. Like, I think he's matured a little bit to where it's like, you know, he's focused so much on winning these games. Like, I would hope he doesn't have time to worry about all this stuff. Then again, he's taking shots at a newspaper from an article from a year ago. So, I mean, I don't know. It is possible.
I don't recall anybody that read anything super negative going into last year's Missouri game. So hopefully there's nothing in the chamber that he's been waiting to use for a year on that either.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Hopefully not, but we'll see. It'll be interesting to see if South Carolina can actually put it together tomorrow, win this game. Like, I think so many people are confident they're going to be able to do.
Yeah, and like we've said for so many games this year, starting fast is going to be key. You'd ideally love to get out to a 21-0 lead in 5 minutes like you did against Oklahoma, but that might be asking a little much because that was just a crazy set of circumstances on how that unfolded. But, man, if you tell me that Carolina's leading this game by 10 or 14 at halftime, I'm feeling pretty confident that in the second half they're going to be able to hold that, if not improve on that lead through the final 2 quarters.
Most definitely. That's one of my keys for tomorrow that I'll get into real quick. The defense, like, you got to be able to enforce your will at the start of this game. Like, you cannot be allowing Missouri to drive up and down the field. If that happens, you're in for a dogfight tomorrow. But I think the way this defense plays, they're going to set the tone right out of the gate, and that's going to allow for the offense to go out here and do what they've been doing and go ahead and score early. And like you said, if you're up at halftime by 10 to 14 points, you're feeling really good about where things are at, because unless this defense has an implosion in the second half, you should be able to pull away to a win here. My other takeaway is, or key, I guess, is running the football. We've seen them running really well this season, but against Missouri over the last 5 years, they have not run the football well in this matchup. So that's going to be a huge thing tomorrow is, can Rocket Sanders continue his little trend of rushing for over 100 yards? Can these other guys around him like Sellers and Attaway, can they also run for that many yards? And also the last thing is be more physical. That was the challenge against A&M, and it worked out really well. Do the same tomorrow, and I think you're feeling really confident about a Gamecock win.
You mentioned the rushing stats. Carolina's not been able to eclipse more than 70 rushing yards against Missouri in the Beamer era so far. How quickly is South Carolina able to eclipse that number tomorrow, in your opinion?
No, it would really take one run to really get it going.
Like a Rocket Sanders run from the 25-yard line and play number 1 for a touchdown.
Dude, you're calling it. You're speaking it into existence. I'm putting it on Vegas. I'll say by the end of the first half, they'll have over 100 rushing yards for sure, and then I think they're going to finish with 200 tomorrow.
That would tell me they're probably going to win this game if they do, because A&M and Alabama ran all over this Missouri defense in those 2 losses they had so far this year. Jack, appreciate it, and we'll check in with you tomorrow on Gamecock Game to get your final thoughts and score predictions as well.
Yeah, appreciate it, my man. Thanks so much.
1 hour in the books. Hour number 2 of the Extra Point coming up next. We'll dive into some other things happening around college football. Who's on upset alert as well? That's all coming up on the Extra Point here on your Football Friday on the Game. 10 o'clock, hour number 2. Welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Football Friday. Of course, plenty more to get into with this matchup between South Carolina and Missouri coming up tomorrow, 4:15 kick. Right here on the game, pregame coverage starting with myself and Elijah Campbell once again with Gamecocks Game Day live at 11 a.m. tomorrow at the party lot out at Sound and Images. Come by and see us. That's all, sponsored as always by our friends over at Lex Med Ortho. You'll be able to listen to that all here in Columbia and in Myrtle Beach as well. So we'll get back into some of that here in just a little bit, but it is, as always, a full slate of football going on around the college football landscape. Not a ton of what I think you would deem to be the sexiest matchups. As I said a little bit earlier, Carolina and Missouri is a ranked versus ranked game. Georgia and Tennessee is a ranked versus ranked game, and that's it. But as we've seen so many times this season, that means somebody's going to get upset, right? There's got to be an upset brewing somewhere on the horizon across the landscape of college football with these top 25 teams. A lot of them going on the road, by the way, that could certainly end up being in trouble coming up tomorrow. I'll get to the potential upsets here in a little bit. Let's kind of focus on the SEC slate to start things off, and we'll start off with what is the biggest game of the weekend. College Game Day is going to be there coming up tomorrow with Tennessee and Georgia squaring off there in Athens. And for Georgia, this is very much a game where their back is up against the wall. I think most of us still feel pretty confident that if you're a 10-2 team in the SEC, say for maybe Missouri, you got a really good shot at getting the college ball playoff. So Georgia cannot afford to lose any more games if they want to get themselves into the CFP. As of right now, when you look at the top 25 that was released on Tuesday, Georgia, though they are 12th, because of the fact that Boise State, being the Group of 5 representative, was on the outside looking in, they would jump Georgia. That means Georgia, as of right now, is the first team out if the college ball playoff were to have started today. Obviously, a lot of football to be played between now and the first weekend in December to settle all those things out. But for Georgia, this is an opportunity to keep themselves alive. Now, there can certainly be a conversation if they lose this game that maybe they still have a chance, but you can handle your business and control your own destiny just by winning this game coming up tomorrow. And the biggest factor in this game really boils down to Nico. Nico Imaliava for Tennessee has been kept under wraps all week. If you watch any of Josh Heupel's press conferences, if you read the availability reports that come out daily, we don't really know, right? Nico went out this past weekend against Mississippi State. And a game that Tennessee ended up winning pretty comfortably, but it was a concussion. And, of course, when it comes to concussions, unlike a broken arm or a sprained ankle or something like that, the healing process for those kind of things is certainly different. And rightfully so. I don't blame Josh Heupel for keeping those kind of things under wraps because you want to, if nothing else, make Georgia prepare for two different quarterbacks. Try and catch them by surprise coming up tomorrow. But everything that as far as speculation goes, seems to point to the fact that Nico likely will not be playing. And then you have Gaston Moore, who came in for him last week, that's just not played a ton of football so far in his college career as a senior, being tasked with going into Athens at night and trying to beat a number 12 Georgia team, which is not going to be easy by any means. And I brought up this point, when the rankings were released on Tuesday. Tennessee didn't move. Tennessee stayed at 7 after their win against Mississippi State, and questionably, Indiana and BYU ended up jumping ahead of them. But my question was, okay, if the committee takes injuries into account, which they say that they do, you can go back to Jordan Travis thing. The reason Florida State got left out of the college ball playoff last year, according to the committee, was the fact that they are not the same team without Jordan Travis. And I think most of us would agree. I don't know if that's necessarily a reason for keeping an undefeated conference champion out, but they did what they did, and it certainly set a precedent going forward. So how do they look at this game, right? Because if Georgia wins this game, that's a win against a top 10 team. But the quick argument against it is saying, okay, well, you beat a top 10 team that did not have their star starting quarterback. How do you view that? And if Tennessee loses this game, how's that viewed as well? You say, okay, yeah, you lost to a lower-ranked team, but you also didn't have your starting quarterback. So do you ding them for that? I mean, you would think that Tennessee would have to fall some and Georgia would have to rise, but at the same time, Georgia still has 2 losses, they'd be even with 2 losses at that point in time. So is that enough to jump Georgia over Tennessee if they win? It's complicated. And again, the committee has set so many different criteria in place where these kind of things are legitimate questions going into this game. But obviously, if Nico does not play, that is a big hindrance for Tennessee and their ability to win this game. Georgia, on the other hand, has quite a bit of injuries concerns for themselves. Lead running back Trevor Etienne is going to be out tomorrow. Roderick Robinson, another running back, also out. Branson Robinson's been out this season. Cass Jones, another running back for them, is questionable. They got a pretty thin backfield. It looks like it's going to be Nate Frazier carrying the rock for most of the game coming up tomorrow for a run game that's not really been all that great this year. Going up against one of the better defensive fronts in all of college football in Tennessee. And if the run game is not where it needs to be and not efficient enough, guess what? You're going to have to throw the ball. And guess what Carson Beck has struggled with doing so much this season, especially against SEC opponents? Throwing the football, namely throwing the football to other teams, as he had another 3-interception performance this past weekend against, or multi-interception performance this past weekend against Ole Miss, leading to that terrible, terrible loss that they had. So what version of him do we get? You know, we've seen before him be able to go out there and play elite level football, namely in the second half against Alabama. Well, where's that guy been? Is he going to be able to come back? I don't know. And again, I am very well in tune with the Georgia football program. I feel like, because Kirby Smart's done this before, when it's the biggest stage, especially at home, these kind of teams show up. I mean, they dominated Texas a few weeks ago and were able to get around Carson Beck throwing 3 interceptions in that game. So the belief that team's going to be able to win a game like this is always going to be there. But again, this has been such a topsy-turvy year, not only in college football, but for Georgia as well. I don't exactly know what version of Georgia we're getting tomorrow, but if it's the one that showed up last weekend against Ole Miss, there's no way, whether Nico's starting or not, there's no way they win this game. So big game tomorrow, obviously huge college ball playoff implications. And for Tennessee, they're controlling their own destiny to get to Atlanta right now. This is really, and they do have Vanderbilt at the end of the year, but their last significant hurdle standing between them and their first trip to Atlanta since 2007, if they can win out and potentially knock Georgia out of the playoff race in the path of doing that. Another game that's not getting as much attention tomorrow, but I feel like is really significant for both sides, is LSU going on the road to the Swamp to take on Florida. Terry, if we could get a cut in here really quickly, let's go to cut number 22. This is Brian Kelly talking about his team's mood after that loss to Alabama last week.
It's been really good. It's been intentional, extremely. Look, nobody's in a good mood. I mean, the food doesn't taste good. Nobody's happy being around each other. But look, we have to be better, you know. And I've made it pretty clear that, you know, I've got to be better. Our coaches got to be better. Our players got to be better. And so we've been intentional in that work. Our guys had a great week. In terms of what they were asked to do. They went out and did it. And I expect them to play at the highest level on Saturday against a team that, in the same regard, is just playing fast and free because, you know, that's how they have to play.
It's one thing to lose a tight game, you know, overtime, nail-biter, last-second field goal, something along those lines. It's another thing to get thoroughly steamrolled in your home venue, what is deemed as the toughest place to play in all of college football in Death Valley, by what many consider your biggest rival within the conference in Alabama. They got embarrassed last week. Embarrassed very similarly to how they got embarrassed against A&M a couple weeks ago in that second half by Marcel Reed. What's the psyche of this team right now is my biggest question, because that was a de facto playoff elimination game. They went into that game against Alabama knowing we got to win this if we want to stay alive with hopes of going to Atlanta or going to the college ball playoff. And now that's seemingly out the window. I don't think there's enough quality left on LSU's schedule to suddenly vault them back in. They got Florida, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma. Vanderbilt, the best of those teams that is currently not ranked right now, that I don't think that's enough to suddenly magically put them back in the conversation, especially with 2 ugly losses like they had to A&M and Alabama. So where's the psyche of this team at? Again, on paper, the numbers and talent tell me that LSU shouldn't have a problem with this game. But are they going through the motions? Are they sleepwalking with the disappointment of knowing that their shot at winning a national championship with a very talented roster has pretty much gone up in smoke? We'll see. on the flip side of things, the same can be said for Billy Napier's team, right? Like at the end of last week, or I guess Thursday of last week, is when Scott Strickland gave his vote of confidence to Billy Napier in terms of saying he's going to come back for another year. Now, I didn't put 2025 on that officially, but we assume that means Billy Napier is returning for another season coming up in Gainesville, being year number 4. And then they go out there and just get skull drugged by Texas on the road. I mean, you blinked and that game was 35-0, it seemed like. So, you know, not a whole lot of redeeming qualities coming away from that game. Now, you did have your third string quarterback, essentially, in Aiden Mitchell starting that game. DJ Lagway looks like he is going to be set to go for tomorrow's matchup against LSU. What's the level of care down there in Gainesville as well? Because, you know, they are very much in a situation of their back up against the wall, because at bare minimum, you would feel like Billy Napier needs to get this team back to bowl eligibility to avoid a lot of uncomfortable conversations this offseason. Now, again, just because Scott Strickland gave him his vote of confidence doesn't mean 100% he's going to be back next year. We've seen programs and universities reverse course on coaches very quickly after saying they're going to be around for a very long time. So you get drugged by LSU, you get drugged by Ole Miss, and then congratulations if you can beat Florida State in the worst game of the entire year after Thanksgiving. That still wouldn't be enough to get you to a bowl game. To get to a bowl, Florida has to find a way to win one of these next 2 games against LSU and Ole Miss and then beat Florida State at the end of the year, which I don't see that happening. Yeah, you can beat Florida State, but I don't see them beating LSU or Ole Miss unless, again, LSU just doesn't have the level of care and they're heartbroken from last week. In a classic case of letting one team beat you twice, they just kind of limp into Gainesville and end up getting beat by what is a Florida team that is talented. They have good players. It's just they do not have the full complement of good players like an LSU or an Alabama or some of these other teams certainly do have. So that game, not the highest on the importance category for a lot of people, but I'm interested to see the trajectory of both these teams after suffering just brutal, ugly losses in their last time out as well. As far as potential upsets in the SEC, Texas going on the road to Arkansas. Arkansas fans hate Texas. That is a game that the Razorback faithful have been frothing at the mouth for a long time. In fact, they ran over Texas the last time they came to town a couple years ago. And look, Arkansas is better than we thought they were. They got completely dominated by Ole Miss last time out to the tune of 63-31. But something about playing a Texas team that you've not seen in a long time with a skilled offense like Arkansas has, I'm not saying they're going to pull off the upset, but if this game is tight, don't be surprised. Now, they give up a lot of passing yards. They're the worst passing defense in all the SEC, so Ewers is going to get his through the air. That's for sure. But they do have an offense that can, I'm not saying it's going to, but can potentially match pace, at least for a while, with what Texas is doing. So that's my one potential upset in the SEC, though I don't have that as a very likely thing on my radar as of right now. It is Friday, Football Friday. We'll check out with our guy Joe Machika from the Big Spur. Get his thoughts on not only this game tomorrow, but what we saw last night on the hardwood with the women as well. It is Football Friday. Tyler Head along with you on the Extra Point here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Football Friday here on the game. As we do each and every Football Friday, we welcome in our guy Joe Machika from the Big Spur for a couple of minutes here. Joe, some technical difficulties prevented us from doing this last week, but Carolina goes on the road, picks up another convincing win over a very good Vanderbilt team, and now rolls into this Missouri game with momentum enough to scare people. We've been talking about this all week long. We're very confident, and a lot of people on our text line and stuff like that. But guys, chill out that you're going to make it, or Carolina's going to go out there and lay an egg instead. But man, it's hard not to get excited about what this team's done this year, especially in these past couple of weeks.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Tyler. Everything that this defense has become, it's been elite. One of the best defenses in the country. All credit to Clayton White there. And then this offense, Dowell Loggins has seemed to turn a corner with this play calling and just confidence with this offense. I mean, the run game is back. Rocket Sanders looks tremendous. Oscar Attaway looks tremendous. And then Lenore Sellers has also been great. Really finding his stride, playing with a lot of confidence. This is the most confidence I think we've seen him play with yet, and it's refreshing. It's good to see, and I think, Tyler, that's the reason why everyone's getting behind this team, because it's hard to ignore when a team is playing, this well and, with this much swagger, because they know exactly how good they are, right, inside the building and everything. So, and they're playing like it, it's a lot of positivity for sure.
And you bring up the point about Lenore Sellers, and I think a lot of that was just proving to himself that he could do it. And again, we've seen plenty of flashes in talent and portions of games early on in the season where he played really well, but he had not yet put together a true, complete 4 quarters of great football really until the A&M game, where, again, he didn't get sacked any times, was throwing the ball well, a throw here or there that certainly was in danger, but nothing that ended up getting turned over. And then minus his 1 fumble last week against Vanderbilt, did the exact same thing. So he is the best version of himself as of right now, and there's no reason to think that's not going to continue through these next couple games to close out the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. And I mean, I think, the biggest defensive foes that you are going to see on the schedule for Lenoris, in terms of like pass rush and linebackers that, can poke the ball out and everything like that. Obviously, you got to stay wary of the fumbles. But, I think the defensive tests for this offense, are pretty much behind them. Now, obviously, can't overlook Mizzou. They play really physically. So, you really have to watch the turnovers and hold on to that football. But, again, I think, certainly turning a corner and easing up on the schedule as well. But, it just, Tyler, I boil it down to confidence, man. Like, it's so refreshing to see out of Lenoris. Like, he's got some swagger to him, right? And I don't know. I didn't think we'd see this side of him this early, but it's fueling the momentum of this team because, obviously the quarterback's such a big leader. And we knew he had the locker room going in and they trusted him. Now, playing like he is and knowing that how good he is, it's translating to the rest of the team for sure.
Yeah, I was thinking about this yesterday, going back to the offseason when we're speculating on schedules and games that we think South Carolina can win and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think we viewed this game as a game that Carolina was going to go into with as much confidence as they are. Look, Missouri was a great team a year ago. Went 11-2, won the Cotton Bowl, one of the best years in program history. And their schedule set up very well for them to be another possibly double-digit win team, which is still certainly on the table for them. But when you watch Missouri play, and we've talked about it a lot, it took a lot of chaos last weekend into Oklahoma. Took some missed field goals by Vanderbilt to beat them in overtime. They had to come back against Boston College earlier on in the season. The two most legitimate teams they've played so far this year in A&M and Alabama have completely run them over and ran them out of the building in both those games. And I don't think there's any reason why South Carolina can't do that tomorrow, which, again, I know I'm scaring people with having so much confidence. But, again, when you look at how Carolina's played against those two exact teams as well, and the transitive property doesn't always work, Carolina flattened A&M, especially in the second half of that game, and was a couple of plays away from beating Alabama in Tuscaloosa, no less, a couple weeks back as well.
Yeah, Tyler. For some reason, I think Eli Drinkwitz has done a really good job of, selling this team to be a real football team, right? I think, the Alabama game, the fact that Carolina was in it that far, that deep into the football game shows that, they were a real football team. And I heard a lot of national analysts after that one, after the Alabama loss, was like, hey, that was a hard fought football game. Like, they didn't give up. Like, they were still in it. They had confidence. And so I think, Tyler, it's past spooky season, beyond spooky season, but I think we find out, who the real, football teams are in October, November. And I think this is one of the games where it's shaping up to be that way. From what we've seen from South Carolina and what we've seen from Missouri, especially when, Missouri plays good teams, like I think it's just one of those things where, Carolina just looks like the real football team at this point.
Well, and I think we've gotten to the point now where you just don't want to see a November coached Shane Beamer team because for whatever reason, and maybe it's strength and conditioning, maybe it's the belief or mindset or whatever it may be, they're playing their best football right now once again in this final month of the season. And I don't know if it's enough to get you into the college ball playoff. Again, I think some chaos is going to have to unfold for that. But there's no reason to think that this team, if they win these next 3 games, which, again, Wofford shouldn't be a problem next weekend, they can't be maybe somewhere around 15th, which, hey, I know it's not the playoff, but saying you're a top 15 team in the country is still worth something.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. And I think, at this point in the season, South Carolina has one job, and that is win out. If chaos happens and they wind up in the playoff, that's obviously a huge bonus, and you get to go play in, one of the first expanded playoff games ever, and that's awesome. But if you just miss it, like it's a stepping stone thing, right? And you controlled your own destiny throughout like the end of the season, right? And you look at the games that they've lost, the LSU game, they didn't really have control over that one. That was a little bit more on the officiating and everything, controlling that outcome. So, if you look at it, you're doing just about everything right. And so that should be, or should give fans, all the confidence in the world that, one, that Shane Beamer is the right man for the job, two, and that, he's taking this program into the next level of college football and taking it into the next level of this SEC.
And that's the frustrating part, is that you don't truly control your own destiny at this point in time. But regardless, there's a night and day difference between where this team was a year ago and where they are now. And even if you're not a team that's in the mix or that ends up making the first 12-team playoff this year, you're going to go into next year, if you finish out this year strong, as one of those teams that's certainly going to be a favorite to be in that position next year, which, again, just shows a step forward from where you were a year ago, which, again, there was concern. Like, oh, man, this team went 5-7, missed a bowl game. That's kind of unacceptable, especially considering what the first 2 years were. And we're well on the way to proving that was just an anomaly, not the norm going forward.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. Couldn't agree more. I think, it's a huge step forward for this program. Again, if you can win out, even better. As you mentioned, this month of November has been great for Shane Beamer and co. So obviously there's a lot of confidence going into these last 3 games. The last game on the schedule is obviously the circled. It's time to pay the piper. Losing 2 in a row against Clemson is not not good around these parts. So I think it's one of those games that I don't necessarily want to call it a must win based on what you've been able to do this season and the hype you've been able to generate around your team. But obviously, any rivalry game is a must win, Tyler.
Well, we brought up this poll earlier. We're in a poll on our Twitter account, 1075 The Game, about who's the biggest villain to Carolina football. And 45% of people said Eli Drinkwitz. That was 5% better than Dabo Sweeney. So the satisfaction of potentially beating the guy that you've never been able to beat, that continues to needle you, would feel pretty good tomorrow if South Carolina is able to pull it off.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think Drinkwitz he's been, at the point where he knows he's got 5 in a row at Carolina, so he's talking like it. So I think everyone inside of this building, and it stems from like inside out, I think, there's just a distaste. They are so mad that this guy up in Columbia, Missouri keeps beating them over and over and over again and keeps running his mouth and talking about it. It's time to end that. I think everyone's so frustrated of him. Anytime, South Carolina's playing Missouri, Drinkwitz is like, oh yeah, we should be a playoff team, really hyping it up to the point where and it's just needling you. It's time to get rid of that monkey off the back for sure.
Obviously, it is a football Friday, but we're in the midst of basketball season as well. Men's team going to be in action tomorrow as they take on Indiana. 2:30 pregame, 3 o'clock tip on our sister station, ESPN 1320 WISW. And the women made their return to Colonial Life Arena last night against Coppin State. We'll get Joe's thoughts on that and what he saw as he covered that game for the Big Spur last night as Carolina improved to 3-0 on the season, as it is a football Friday here on the Extra Point. Tyler and Joe Machika from the Big Spur here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head on your Football Friday, hanging out with Joe Machika from the Big Spur. Last night, South Carolina women back in action at Colonial Life Arena after picking up the victories against Michigan in Las Vegas and then NC State in Charlotte over the weekend. They hung the banner and defeated Coppin State 92-60 last night, which was actually Dawn Staley's 60th straight home victory. She talked about that last night after the game.
I don't. I just think about the next game. I really do. Like, if we stop to think about what we've accomplished, we'll let our guard down. So I think it's great that you roll it off. I didn't know that you can roll it off because I've moved on to the next, to the next game. It's unimaginable. Like, you think about winning national championships, but you don't think about how you do it. Like, you don't think about, a 60-game home win streak. It's not one of the goals that we set, but to actually live it and do it and be a part of it is, I gotta tip my hat to all the players and all the coaches that have created what we've created. So I think it's remarkable, but I'm not going to think about it after I leave this, after I walk through that door, but only trying to just add to the next one, try to get better like this.
And, obviously no surprise last night, South Carolina was able to take care of Coppin State. I will give Coppin State credit. They hung in there a lot longer than I thought they would. They did have a 16-13 lead towards the end of the first quarter before South Carolina went on a 12-0 run to go up 25-16 and then pretty much held the lead from there. But this is kind of one of those things, especially with how much this team has changed so much in the offseason with obviously Camila Cardoso departing for the WNBA and not having that just huge presence down there low below the basket. They're still trying to gel, I guess is the best way to put it. And having a game like this after having two high-profile games start the season was probably exactly what Carolina needed last night.
Yeah, Tyler, absolutely. They're still trying to find their post presence. Having Ashlyn Watkins back has been big, but they're really figuring it out. And credit to Mylasia Fulwiley. Really had a game last night, 23 points. Just looked natural with the basketball. But yeah, this team is figuring it out. Hung a banner last night. Shout out to everyone who made it out to Colonial Life. That arena was packed on a school night. So pretty impressive, and just goes to show you to everything that Dawn has built too. Having that many people out on a school night on a Thursday night for your home opener is pretty special. And again, 60 home game win streak is also something to tip the cap to as well. But they're certainly gelling. I think games like last night, as you mentioned, we were talking before the show, certainly helped the team gel a lot and prepare you for what's to come.
There are a few concerns with this team as of right now, one of them being Raven Johnson, who, again, was expected to be another high-level contributor once again this season. It's just not been able to click quite yet so far this season as she ending up last night with no points, coming off of a 4-point and a 2-point performance the last two games respectively, and she has yet to hit one shot from the outside, which is what we know is kind of one of her specialties there. And, again, just something not quite clicking, whether it's her spot in the lineup or just again, kind of trying to get that chemistry with new teammates. That there's something up with Raven through these first couple of games.
Yeah, Tyler. I think, offensively, Raven just hasn't been herself, but she's been able to get into areas of the floor that, aren't necessarily her specialty. She had 9 rebounds, led the game in rebounds against NC State. So was able to get to the glass. And I think, it's just one of those things. It'll come with the offense. And again, as we mentioned, it's still early on in the season. Dawn talked about it last night after the game as well. It's a new team. They're still getting used to, the swing of things. And it is a lot of last year's team, but again, new dynamics. Again, you're still trying to figure out the post and everything like that, and how you're planning to attack it. So again, I think it's just one of those things where Raven's got to come along. Maybe her offensive game isn't here at the beginning of the year, but it's going to be one of those things, especially if she continues to, get rebounds or do the things that aren't necessarily, scoring the basketball. It's going to help out the team in the long run, and then her time will come. I mean, we've seen that as well when you're so deep.
Chloe Kitts returning from her one-game academic suspension against NC State gets another double-double with 19 points and 10 rebounds. But a big reason for why this game was so important last night was definitely to get to see some more of the young talent. Again, Joyce Edwards and Miriam Dowd have gotten to play quite a bit through these first couple games. They both went out there and had good, respectable performances last night. Joyce Edwards with 10 and Dowd with 10 as well. But Maddie McDaniel also getting on the court for the first time last night, 2 points in 17 minutes for her as she grabbed a couple rebounds as well. As we know, Carolina's always going to have a very, very deep bench, and the quality of Carolina's bench could beat most teams in the country themselves. And again, you're seeing this next crop of young talent that's getting out there and getting some minutes in these early games.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge for Miriam Dowda to get out there and then also hit a three. Brad Muller told me preseason that she was going to look to space the floor a little bit. So it's good to get one down from behind the arc, for Dowda. And then Maddie McDaniel playing. Saw some minutes last night with Tessa Johnson rehabbing the ankle. I think she's going to be out just the one game, might be back this weekend. We'll see. But, yeah, good for McDaniel. She, was able to, get a dose of college ball and really, looked like the game was starting to slow down to her towards the end. So good for her to get her first minutes, and then Dowda also getting on the board as well.
So, again, Carolina improves to 3-0 on the season. They'll take on East Carolina coming up on Sunday at 2 o'clock, which you'll be able to listen to right here on the game. Pregame coverage starting at 1:30 for that game between Carolina and the East Carolina Pirates. Joe, only a couple more minutes with you here. Your final thoughts. How does this game go tomorrow with Carolina and Missouri?
Tyler, I'm going to add to the rat poison. I think this game is going to go good for Carolina. It's going to be under the lights, especially with the quarterback situation with Missouri. I think Brady Cook's a better quarterback than Pine. I think Pine is one of those quarterbacks where if you get into the backfield, you can kind of shake him, rattle him. You have to defend the run, be good against the run. But I think these are all things that the South Carolina defense is capable of. Just need the offense to play somewhat in sync and should take care of the
You can give an interesting perspective on this because you're tuned into the Notre Dame program, and people forget Drew Pine could have started the Gator Bowl against South Carolina a couple years ago before transferring out, and he had a decent season that year at Notre Dame. What was the sentiment around him with the Irish fan base? And I can see the Missouri fans, I don't know if their belief in him is all that high right now.
Yeah, the belief was never really in Drew Pine from a Notre Dame perspective, just another guy in a long line of quarterbacks that you just can't quite figure it out with. So, again, that's probably where my, favoring to Brady Cook comes from. But I think Brady's a better leader. Drew Pine tends to get rattled a little bit. Obviously, there's the viral clip of Tommy Rees on the phone with him. And, looks like he's seeing ghosts. So, I don't know. I think, for Missouri, if you've got Brady Cook, it's going to be a lot closer of a ball game. But, we'll see. Doubtful going in. So, I think Pine might be the guy. But we'll see. Burden and Weiss can make a lot of plays as well. So gotta contain and match up and tackle. But I mean, easier said than done.
That is very true. And again, when you do have Burden and Weiss, they're always going to give you opportunities on the outside. And again, Drew Pine can't exactly chuck the ball deep outside of that one throw that he threw into, I think, double or triple coverage last week against Oklahoma. The Burden just went up and made a great catch with it, helped set them up to eventually win that game. But those guys are really good with yards after the catch too. If you get the ball out to them in space, they can make you pay. So like you said, South Carolina's going to be very efficient when it comes to wrapping up, making their tackles, and getting these guys to the ground quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw a lot of Pine throwing into double coverage at Notre Dame. So maybe the lights at Williams-Brice will maybe force a couple of those going their way. But so again, it's going to be big for the secondary. Nick Eamon-Wario, Donald Fortune, just contain, play man. I mean, you got really talented wide receiver core to match up with. So, I mean, this is it.
Last one for you here. When the clock's hit zero around 7:30, 7:45 tomorrow night, what's the scoreboard going to read?
I've 24-17 South Carolina.
I think it's going to be a tight game.
Maybe stretching into the 35s-ish range for Carolina. I don't know. I mean, depends on how the offense goes, but 24-17.
I think some people might actually be disappointed it's only a 7-point game with how good we think Carolina's going to be.
Yeah. It's going to be a scrappy one, right? It's going to be a war. We've seen that whenever Missouri tends to come to town, especially with Eli Drinkwitz. So I don't know. I think it's one of those where, Dowell Loggins in this offense, they just bleed the clock, get out of there. Let's not do anything stupid and get out of there with a win.
Well, we'll certainly see what happens, and we'll check in next week with a lower stakes game against Wofford, and one that we should feel pretty confident about winning as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully my power works and everything, and I can join you and everything. But good to be back, Tyler. Appreciate you having me on as always.
Absolutely. Again, you can read Joe Machika stuff on thebigspur.com. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of The Extra Point. Which teams across college football are on upset alert this weekend? There's a couple of them. That's coming up next. Extra Point, Tyler Head along with you on your Football Friday here on The Game. Welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Football Friday here on The Game. Chat with Wes and Chris coming up top of the 11. Get their thoughts ahead of this game between South Carolina and Missouri and see if Carolina can improve to 7-3 and still have goals of getting to a double-digit win season and, heck, maybe even the playoffs if chaos goes in their favor. We'll remind you quickly about the new craft beer card. It's here. It's only $59. Saves you around $300. You can go online to 1075thegame.com and click on the Sweet Deals tab to purchase a craft beer card that can get you craft beers all across the Midlands area for the companies involved in that. So again, 1075thegame.com, click on Sweet Deals, purchase your new craft beer card for just $59. As I've been saying all season long, 2024 has given me serious 2007 vibes with the amount of chaos and unpredictability that it has. As we sit here in mid-November, most seasons at this point, if I asked you the question of, hey, who's the national championship game going to be played against, you'd be able to say probably a combination of two at most, maybe 4 teams that you feel like have really set themselves apart in college football to be able to be in the conversation to play in that game. But this year is obviously a lot different, where week to week, we don't know who's going to be upset. We don't know who's going to be jumping in or out of the top 10. And now with an expanded playoff and the possibility of a lot of chaos that could happen within the playoff itself, we just don't really know what can happen on a week-to-week basis. That being said, I always look at who's got the best chance of getting upset week to week. And there's a few teams, pretty highly ranked ones. Sorry, I had to plug my headphones back in there, that are maybe sweating a little bit going into this weekend. I brought this up a little bit earlier. Texas could get upset at Arkansas. I'm not putting it super high. I just think the desire of the Arkansas fan base to get back at a team that they have not liked for a very long time has potential to make this a crazy atmosphere. What Arkansas doesn't have going for them is the fact they're the worst pass defense in all the SEC. And again, Jackson Dart and Ole Miss a couple weeks ago basically named their score against them and put up 63 points and over 500 yards through the air. So no reason to think that Ewers and Texas can't do that. I will say I've liked what I've seen when Taylor Green's been healthy this year of Arkansas's ability to put points on the board and get a lot of yards. So they can make it interesting. I'm not putting that as a highly likely upset. But if this was a tight game in the fourth quarter, I'd not sit here and tell you that I'd be shocked by it. Elsewhere, let's go to BYU playing host to Kansas. First of all, BYU is coming in off of a miracle of a win, aided by a holding call on a 4th down deep in their own territory that propelled them past Utah. Yes, Utah didn't play great in the second half of that game. I'm not saying it's all on that officiating call, but BYU won that game by the skin of their teeth. They're undefeated. They are sitting as the lone team atop the Big 12, but they're taking on a Kansas team that many people coming into the season expected to be really good, to be in the conversation for a playoff, to be in the conversation for the Big 12 championship race, and that has just not happened here as of late, or excuse me, has just not happened this season. However, they are potentially turning the tide kind of at the right time now. You go back to 2 games ago, they narrowly lost by 2 points to their in-state rival, a ranked Kansas State team. And then last week, a pretty convincing win over a ranked Iowa State team, 45-36. And don't look now, but Jalen Daniels, somebody a lot of people had as a dark horse Heisman candidate coming into the season, was injured for a lot last year, playing his best football as of right now. Over the course of their last 4 games, he has thrown for 8 touchdowns and just 1 interception. And he was very inconsistent to start the season, as he had only 5 touchdowns to 8 interceptions through those first 5 games of the year. So he's heating up at the right time. And again, BYU, a emotional, nail-biting victory over an in-state rival last week. I don't know. I kind of like Kansas' chances in this one. And then Oregon, to me, going on the road to Wisconsin. Now, Oregon right now, they're the number 1 team in the country, and rightfully so. But, and this is going to catch up to somebody at some point, the travel aspect has got to be wearing on them. And I think it is starting to. They still have 1 more bye week. So they will get a bye after this game where they go on and take on Wisconsin. But their previous bye, all the way back in the middle of September, September 21st, was the last weekend that Oregon did not play football. Since then, they've gone on the road to UCLA. They've played Michigan State and Ohio State at home. But in the game since, at Purdue, traveling across the country, versus Illinois, traveling back across the country, at Michigan, traveling back across the country, and then hosting Maryland, once again traveling back across the country to host that game. Now flying to Wisconsin, I'm just saying, I know they're favored. I know they're a much better team, but if Oregon fell to Wisconsin coming up tomorrow, I'd not be shocked by it because that is a lot of travel to do even for one of the most talented teams in the entire country. So be on the lookout for those upsets this weekend, as it should be in for probably another chaotic weekend of football like we've seen all year long. That'll do it for the Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Get a vibe check on where we're at ahead of South Carolina and Missouri. Coming up tomorrow here on The Game.